Hello, and thank you again to those of you who are just joining us. Our number of participants are still ticking up, so please feel free to get comfortable and we'll get started in just a minute or so. All right, well, greetings everyone, and welcome to today's conversation, Women in Power in the Workplace. My name is Marissa Smith, and I'm the Director of Student and Recent Alumni Engagement here at the Alumni Association. And I want to give a huge thank you to all of you who have made the time to join us today. Life is hectic and strange and weird right now. And I think you all have done a wonderful, wonderful thing for yourself by taking this time to pause and engage in this important conversation. And I also want to give a huge thank you to our panelists, who you will be hearing a lot from in just a few minutes, for taking the time and energy to share their stories and experiences with us so that we can learn and grow from them as well. So before we jump in, just a couple of announcements to share. For those of you who have joined our webinars before, you've heard us give a shout out to our Alumni Association members and donors. They power everything that we do. So we would be remiss if we didn't recognize them. And if you would like to learn more about Alumni Association membership, please visit us online at umnalumni.org. We have really ramped up our virtual engagement opportunities in these difficult times, and wanted to highlight a few of the sessions that we have coming up that you might be interested in. They're listed out on your screen. We have multiple virtual events happening a week right now, so there's something for everyone. And you can learn more either by reading our e-newsletters that go out twice a week days, or by visiting us again online at umnalumni.org/virtual. If you are new to Zoom, welcome. You most likely have joined today's webinar using your computer audio, but if you're having any issues with that, or you would prefer to listen over the phone, instructions for how to do that are displayed on your screen. And then you're also welcome to ask questions. We want this to be interactive. We've prepared, and the panelists have prepared a slate of questions that we think are really interesting, but we want to hear from you as well, and we'll do our best to reserve time to take your questions as well. So without further ado, I'm going to unmute our panelists and invite them to begin to introduce themselves. Let's do unmute all. Here you go. And let's start with Dede, who I believe is on.
Hi guys, I'm Dede Ahadome, and I currently lead strategy and operations for Google's technical support team. I've been at Google for a little over 3.5 years. And prior to that, I spent about 16 years in Minnesota. And I was the lead of finance director at Target for about 10 years. And before that, I spent some time at Medtronic as well. My entire career has been in finance and operations, and I graduated from University of Minnesota in 2008. And I'm super excited to be with you guys here today.
And Kristin.
Hi, everyone. I am Kristin Pardue. I am CEO and co-founder of Rêve Consulting, which is a strategy and service design organization based here in Northeast Minneapolis. I started the company about 11 years ago, almost to the week. So coming out of the Great Recession, had a vision for how we might transform how strategies are developed and implemented by bringing together great strategy practices, but also human-centered design. in order to really innovate for our clients' customers. So that's what I've been doing and building for the last 11 years. I started my career at General Mills in finance and got my MBA at the University of Minnesota at the same time in strategy and finance. I went on to a Six Sigma and operations role at General Electric. And then my final corporate landing spot was Vice President of Strategy and Innovation for Carlson Companies for their hotel division. So a 20-year corporate vet, and then went out on my own.
Thank you for being here. And Anne.
Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Anne Sheldon, and I'm the Vice President of Global Supplier Quality at Medtronic. And actually, I'm going to be transitioning into a new role here shortly. I just accepted a new role this week. I'm going to be the Vice President of Product Security at Medtronic, the first time that we have had that office set up. So I'm excited to grow and build a new business within Medtronic. I've been there for 25 years, and prior to that, I worked for Rosemont Engineering and Nordic Track. I am an alumni of the University of Minnesota. I have a mechanical engineering degree. I also attended the Carlson School of Business as one of their Minnesota executive programs. And I'm also on the board of directors for the University of Minnesota Alumni Association. At Medtronic, in addition to my day job, I spend a lot of time growing the careers of all of our employees that happen to cross my path. I'm very passionate about diversity and inclusion. I'm an active member of our women's network, and I have led 5 various lean in circles at Medtronic. So really passionate about bringing new talent in and helping them grow and learn how to work in a very large corporation.
Great, thank you for being here. And Hardisha.
Hello, I'm Hardisha White. I did go to the University of Minnesota as well. I studied chemical engineering, and I was actually the first in my family to receive a bachelor's degree, so it was a big milestone for me and my family. I currently work as a senior process engineer at General Mills. I've been with General Mills for 7 years, and in this most recent role as the senior process engineer, I've helped lead million-dollar capital projects for some products you might recognize, including the internalization of Larabar, and then the launch of our Yoplait Oui Petites, the yogurt in the glass jars. When I'm not at work, outside of work, I really enjoy playing ultimate frisbee. I love traveling and then also dancing.
Nice, thank you for sharing. All right, I'm going to stop sharing our screen so that we can just have dive into our conversation here. And to start, let's start with you, Hardisha. We'll go in kind of reverse order here. Can you describe where you are in your career? What phase would you describe that you are in?
I would say like middle to early career. So I said I've been at General Mills for 7 years, and I have that it actually includes 2 internships with them. I graduated college in 2014, and I've worked with General Mills right out of college. So since then, I have gotten a couple promotions, but still fairly early career for me.
Great. Anne?
I am more late in my career. Obviously been in the workplace for over 30 years, and look forward to retirement at a date that's unplanned at this point in time. But really, from a career standpoint, I am taking on new responsibilities. You can hear that because I'm doing it. But really, part of my focus is leaving a legacy. And so I've recently become a certified internal coach at Medtronic, which is a certification that I can also pursue outside of Medtronic, the International Coaching Federation, and anticipate transitioning my career someday to spending more time coaching employees and helping them problem solve themselves and get to where they want to go.
And Kristin?
I'd say I'm entering my 4th chapter. So I'm at my midlife point, 30 years like Anne behind me, lots of great learning. This next decade is really going to be about scaling. So we've continued to grow Rêve Consulting. We also started a nonprofit 10 years ago called Rêve Academy, because we had a passion for growing the next generation of digital talent here in the Twin Cities. So that continues to keep us busy. And then we've got a few other projects in the works that we are investing in, one being a virtual reality platform. So from a business perspective, we're trying to continue to grow and diversify, and all the while, me personally trying to be a great mom to my two boys who are teenagers. One entered college this year, and all that holds, as well as being a mom and sister too. So lots of things calling my attention.
And Dede?
Hi, I would say I'm probably mid to middle. Middle is probably the way I describe it. I've been in the workforce now for about 15 or 16 years, and I am in Google terms at director level, and probably senior director level in a lot of the different other companies, because we're very different in the tech. And I would say from a career perspective, I spent the first 10 to 14 years or so doing a breadth of experiences. So just really collecting different breadths. And now I'm at a point where I'm going deep, and I've joined the business. So I've always been in kind of an enablement function, and have had a lot of different experiences and seen parts of the company. And now I'm attached to a business and trying to draw all those experiences to make an impact within one area. So I'm excited for the next phase.
Great. Thank you all for sharing your responses to that. I thought it was really interesting. There's no set definitions of ways to respond to what phase of your career you see yourself in, but it's clear that how you define that has an impact on how you see your role and where you choose to engage both in your workplace and outside of it. So it's something I think that would be interesting for us all to reflect on, kind of where do we see ourselves in terms of the phase of our career and what impact does that have? And that's a nice segue into our next question, which is about the identities that you hold as a person and as an employee, and the commitments that you manage. Maybe they're parental, like Kristin, you already alluded to, or a caregiver in some other way. But how have your identities and your commitments played a role in how you manage your career? And would anyone like to start on that question?
Sure, I can. Back in 2008, where I was starting to envision what Rêve could be, a big part of that was my boys were young. They were in elementary school. I was, traveling, working hard. My husband was working at Target on Target.com replatforming. So he was busy and flying around. And, for me, I think it was really getting clear on what my values were. At that point, I was turning 40. And so it was kind of a seminal moment, both from an age perspective, as well as we were just starting to eke out of the recession. My role had changed greatly at Carlson, given we were in hospitality. What you're seeing today and travel and hospitality, in these past few weeks were similar to what I was experiencing at Carlson. So my role had changed. So for me, it was like the convergence of job, identity, family identity, and asking myself, what do I want this next chapter to look like? And for me, it was really around having more balance, being more present, and really leaning into my vision of me as a working mom. And so that really was the accelerant for me to move what was really familiar and comfortable inside a corporate community, which I learned over 20 years how to navigate, to do something totally different, which I had never envisioned myself as an entrepreneur. But I guess the combination of the vision and then kind of feeling really grounded in what those future values I wanted to live out looked like was really important for me to take this big leap.
Would anyone else like to jump in on that?
Kristin, this is Anne. I would say I love how you linked it to values. I do think that for me, that has been something that both my husband and I have spent a lot of time talking about, of what is most important to us, what values do we have as a family and as a couple, and how do we serve that collectively? And those values, we come back to them and we make decisions together as a family. There's certainly trade-offs. My children now are adults. They're 22 and 25, but we were both working parents when they were young, and there were trade-offs. Like I would go into work early and he would stay home with the kids in the morning because we wanted to make sure that they were fed and that they didn't go to a school program in the morning. That meant that he worked late and I picked them up early, and maybe we had a late dinner. But that was about us and our decision around what was important to us as a family, what needed to happen. And, I think you can, I use the word work-life balance, I think is always overused and probably not true, because there's times where there's not balance and that's the way it is. But what it comes down to is your choice and your values and how you use your choices to live the life that you believe is most important to you.
But I add on to what Anne was saying about it's important for you to decide what is important to you. So you have to think about that and figure that out, and then just make sure that is communicated very clearly to your employer. For me, I am in a relationship, but like I'm not married, I don't have kids, I don't have pets. So but I also don't want to be like taken advantage by a corporation that's like, oh, well, you don't have anything important in your life, so you can just work all of these hours, because that is not the case. And you say work-life balance is used a lot, but I do like to use that. I like to use it a lot in the sense of when I travel for work, I can travel from 30 to 50% of the time. And so it's like, how do I manage my relationship? How do I manage my friendships when I'm traveling? Because I can actually travel over weekends as well. And it can get really hard, and long hours are worked when I'm traveling, because that's the focus of what I'm doing when I'm traveling, is like, that's my purpose, is work. But when I come back, I am very good at like taking my time back, is what I like to call it. I'll let my boss know, like, I worked the weekend, so I'm going to take, Friday off this week so I can just get my life back in order and have self-care, have a self-care day to make sure I feel good about myself and where I am. And like same with vacation, right? We don't have vacation days that roll over. So I make sure like all of my vacation days get used because they are for me. And like like the company doesn't care if I don't use them all, right? I'm losing out essentially if I don't take those vacation days. So I'm making sure I have my priorities when I am working, and then I also take time for myself when I come back from travel or am lighter in work.
I can share a little bit. This is Dede. So I think for me, I think of it as being able to bring my authentic self to work, and knowing as a person in an underrepresented group, there is a pressure of always feeling like you need to work 110% than the person next to you, or as a female, you need to do even more to be recognized. And so I had to get very vocal about who I am and how I work. And I actually don't do work-life balance. I usually say work-life integration, because I can never really balance it, and it's all very integrated. So I have very little kids. I would drop them off in the morning and take a call while I'm working, while I'm driving them, and then I might stay a little late some days and leave early because there's a football game. And I think the key is having your leadership and the folks that you work with understand that you will deliver. So it's not about the number of hours that I put in, but the time that I put in will be quality and it will be productive. And so with that, I was still able to, even as I went to business school, I went part-time and still did it in 2 years. And I had to prioritize that. And so it's communicating that and showing that you will be productive. And once everybody got comfortable with that, I felt very comfortable with myself and didn't feel like I had to prove anything.
Wow, thank you all for sharing. I think a theme that I heard throughout all of your answers was the importance of recognizing and living out your values. And I'm just curious, as sort of a short follow-up, what advice would you have for our listeners in terms of strategies for getting clear on your values? Like I think it's clear to me that you all have had some time to sit with these things and identify what's important to you, but for some of us who might still feel like that's drifting a little bit, what's worked for you, what hasn't worked for you in terms of identifying those values? Does anybody feel like they want to jump in on that question?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And you had said I think you said you're certified through ICF as a coach, right? And so for me, I had the blessing of having a coworker and best friend who was also a certified coach. And when I was starting to feel kind of these, rumblings inside that I needed a change, she was a very safe person, still is one of my best friends. And I asked her, could you help me navigate this? And as a certified coach, she had the proper skills to ask me some powerful questions and give me some tools to get clear, at least get that initial outline on, what words would I put to how I make decisions, how I call balls and strikes in my life, right? And that's really, I think, the simplest way to express what your values are at their essence. And so for me personally, it was having a really trusted person in my life that I could, be really authentic with and vulnerable with, and help me navigate that. And so, that was my strategy of starting to get clear.
And that's exactly what they teach us in coaching, Kristin. And there's the powerful questions, right? It's about what's important to you. And you might answer that question with getting promoted. Well, what's important about getting promoted? So, digging deeper of not just the promotion, but what's important about it. And, think of things to think about as what is your legacy? What legacy do you want to have? What do you want people to remember you by? The people that you interact with on a daily basis, what do you want them to say about you? You flip it and you also say, what drives you crazy? What makes you mad? Those are definitely things that are not values to you. Those are, so it helps you kind of put that boundary of, this is where I know I have very clear what I'm passionate about. This side is where I know it's not. And keeping track of that over time, it's definitely not something that just happens. I don't know, Kristin, how long it took for you to find those, but my early coaching experience says sometimes it might take months to figure out what those core values are.
For sure. And them, I tell my team, them when they get stepped on, right?
Yeah.
So you start to understand your values when you have the physical and emotional reaction. Usually adverse reaction to something. And so that also is just, as you navigate your days, you can start to pick up on that when you're, intentionally focused on defining what those values are.
Dede or Hardisha, anything you would like to add there?
Yeah, I think for me, I also look at it as what I don't like about people and what I like about them. And usually it's the managers and folks that I've worked with. So when I have a manager who is always setting up an 8 o'clock meeting, even though I block my 8 to 9 for drop-offs, that is a trigger of, let's have a conversation around what's important to me. And then as a leader of people, I usually do start by asking folks as we get to know each other in our working styles, what is important to you and how can I help as a manager or, somebody who's been in the workforce for a while, how can I help you live those values? But it can be hard sometimes to share those because, especially when you're early in your career and you're trying to make an impact. And so it's really, really important to be able to have those open dialogue and trust. So you can share what makes you tick and what doesn't, because that really propels you to perform even better when you're able to get those out of the way. So I would say having trust and open dialogue and conversations with folks and just bringing your authentic self and sharing what's important to you openly.
Thank you.
The last thing I would add is just to all of these points, is self-reflection. You honestly need to take time for self-reflection to think about these points and what are your motivation and what demotivates you. I journal at a minimum at least once a week, usually every other day, just to kind of keep that thinking process and that self-reflection happening to make sure I can understand my feelings and what I am feeling and why I'm feeling it. I think why is usually the biggest question I try to answer, what is going on? What is the deep down root cause of why I'm feeling this way?
Thank you all for expanding on that. I think there were some really great tips and advice shared in that last round. So this webinar is Women and Power in the Workplace. So we do want to talk a little bit about power structures and navigating, advancing in the workplace. So the next question is around strategies for achieving a more prominent role in your organization. What have been some of the keys to your success? And Dede, do you want to start there?
Sure, I will. I'm happy to. I think for me, I've always been a high achiever. And early on in my career, especially when I was at Target, I remember having some managers who said, "You're so young and you have your whole years ahead of you. Like, what is the rush? And take your time." And I always knew who I was, and I always wanted to continue growing and adding to my portfolio. And I realized very, very early on that relationships made a huge impact, especially somebody like me. I came to America to go to school, born and raised in Ghana. I had a very different accent, had a very different culture, didn't really know a lot of people in a Midwestern environment where the relationship and the styles are very passive, and I'm very direct as a person. And so I knew that I had to build strong relationships and get to know people who would be wearing my t-shirt in that room when I'm not there. And that meant I had to really perform well. And that's like core number one, is you need to do your work well so that everybody understands that you will perform. Then you can add on to that with what else do you bring to the table, whether it's like I said, breadth of experience, so that I became very well known as, if you want somebody who can tell you everything from accounting to strategy to supply chain, you can go to Dede, and then you have someone you've worked with who's got a good collaboration message and story with you. They can wear that t-shirt for you and be your advocate. And that really helped with getting promoted. And then similarly, when I moved from a very, very structured relationship that I'd built 10 years at Target, I knew everybody, to Google, where I knew nobody. And frankly, there were probably a handful of people that they didn't even know what Target was. They just know Facebook and other tech companies. I knew I had to really strategize. And again, it was making sure I had the right projects, I was performing, and then I had advocates that can speak on my behalf. And with that, I think you can really get people championing you and can help you progress pretty quickly. But it really starts with sharing where you want to be. And I had the same here, even at Google. They said, well, you're very young, and directors are in their 40s or 50s, and you're very young. And I said, well, let's talk about my capabilities and my abilities and what I can bring, not necessarily how young I am or how old I am, and being able to share that openly with people I trusted who could then help carry that message for me.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Who would like to chime in next?
I can add. To build off what Dede was saying, I think it's very important to communicate to your manager what you are looking for and where you're looking to go in your career, which involves, again, also knowing like what motivates you and what demotivates you. So you can give them options of like, these are the things I'm looking for in my next career move. And then having them support you, like you need them as well as others. To Dede's point, like relationships is huge. You need to make sure you have people who can speak to you and know what you're capable of doing. I was even doing this recently because, again, I'm early-ish career. It's like, okay, I'm trying to set up my next career move. I need to understand like who's all involved with making this decision if I can even get promoted in the first place. And I'm like, okay, got these 4 names down. I'm going to make sure I set up meetings with them to make sure I talk to them so they know what I'm doing and they know where I want to go in my career, so people can be on board when that comes up and my name comes up in a room for an opportunity to be promoted.
Yeah, I would add onto both of those great comments about you folks are talking about sponsorship. I love how Dede said, wear my t-shirt in the room. What a great idea. At Medtronic, we have a lot of employee resource groups, and those are opportunities for employees to develop in a role or do something that's outside of their daily job. But those resource groups are all sponsored by executives within the company. And so from an exposure standpoint, people who volunteer to lead a committee, to lead a special project, they're given an opportunity to sit with general managers that they might not be able to do from their current seats just because of where they're located. And so if there's an opportunity to work on something like that in your company and gain more exposure at that senior leadership, it goes a long way. I can tell you, when we look to fill roles, and we will look back on people who volunteered and leaned into those actions and performed and got people to follow them, even though it wasn't something that was driven by a project that's related to any of our products.
Yeah, maybe I could close this one out. I love what has been said about relationships and networking and obviously being competent at your job. I think for me, my strategy was never to really ask for the promotion, but to demonstrate that. So where I could take on a bigger role or envision a bigger role in the current one that I had was great. It was like prototyping, my capabilities in, a current role, but with the aspiration for what that future role could look like. So to your point, Anne, that may look like taking on a project within your current role. You might be adding to your plate, but if it has the elements of that future role you're aspiring to, like Dede said, being really intentional. For me, that was really helpful from moving me from, a senior director level to the executive team at Carlson in my last corporate role. So just being able to, show people that I could do the work of an executive was really helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I wanted to add, just because this comes up with my team quite a bit, and I don't know if it resonates with this group, but people conflate leadership and moving up and progression with leading people. So I've had to have a lot of conversations with folks about the fact that you don't necessarily need to be a manager of people to demonstrate that you can be a leader. And leadership is a very strong component for progression and moving up the ladder in a lot of organizations. So to Anne's point, demonstrating that through whether it's an ERG or even just leading a project on the team. I've had folks that just lead planning something for the team, but it demonstrates their leadership capabilities, even excel better than people that are so focused on becoming a manager of people. So just wanted to call that out, that, don't think that you need to be a manager of people necessarily to move up the ladder, and don't miss out the opportunity to demonstrate leadership as well.
Yeah, and Dede, I would add that sometimes I think it's harder to be a leader of a project where you're not the performance leader, right? Because when we have people who work for us, innately they know we control their salary, their performance review rating, and likely where they're going to go. So we can, in general, get people to go with us a lot easier than when you're being a program manager. And so when I look for strong leaders, I actually look for people that haven't had all people leadership experience, because I think it takes greater skill to actually influence to get work done.
Mm-hmm. So going off of that, the next question is about navigating power structures. And I'm curious, how have you navigated power structures throughout your career? And I want to tie in a couple of comments and questions that we've gotten from participants about communication style. A lot of our advice so far on the panel has been about being clear on your values and then being direct with the people around you about what those are, to avoid missteps or miscommunications. But there's been some comments from folks about they've tried that and they've come up against barriers, whether that be in their coworkers, both men and women, people of different generations. So the next, I guess, conversation is about power structures and what's worked for you, what hasn't worked for you, and maybe if anybody has any stories or examples around coming up against barriers to our ideal way of communicating, I guess. Anyone want to jump in on power structures?
I can start because I think I've had a couple examples here. I think, to the stylistic comment and then just power structures in general, I really think it starts with understanding what are the values and what is important and what is the priority for the person that you're working with, or the folks that you need to help you get to that next level. So often people that are in power are at the 20,000 foot. And then those of us that are working and doing the actual work on the ground are probably more at the tactical level. So helping to understand what their goals are and what their we call them objectives, key objectives are making sure their number one is your number one and that it's not your number 10 on the list is often helpful. And then the second would be really trying to understand the landscape and the political landscape of your organization. Sometimes it's, you know, the person who is least involved in the work is the one that's making the decision, which means you need to be able to translate the work that you're doing and show how that impacts the strategy and moves the business forward, which means you need to get out of your shell and be able to tell that story and that narrative, whether you're an engineer or you're a project manager. I often have like a one-pager, very, very, very snippet of what I've done. And I usually will set up a coffee chat with people and say, hey, I've seen you in a lot of meetings. I'm new. Here are the things I've worked on and here's what I'm working on. What is important to you or what advice do you have? And people are often very open to sharing that. And then you start to build that relationship. And then stylistically, you know, people are very different in how they take information. Some people are just an email, some people are a quick elevator conversation, and some people want a laundry list. So you just really need to understand folks. And I ask a lot of questions of people who have worked with them before and say, what works in this organization or this department, and kind of get tidbits. But that requires work, and it actually is almost like a full-time job outside of just doing your work. But if it's really important to you, I would invest in that time and try to understand that. And if you've reached a roadblock or you've hit a roadblock, whether it's not being able to communicate well with someone or somebody doesn't understand you, I usually will just bite the bullet and say, hey, it looks like we've had some impasses a couple of times. Would you like to just grab some time so we can talk through that and understand that and hash it out before it becomes a big deal that becomes part of your brand and it's hard for you to retract? So that's kind of been my approach.
Great
Dede,
advice.
I think that is such great advice, and I would springboard off your comment about having the courage to have those difficult conversations. I know there's a lot of studies out there that say when we run into conflict, a lot of times it's because we are misunderstanding each other, that we're coming at it from a different perspective, and we just don't even realize it. And so building relationships with people have a tendency to, I don't want to say eliminate, but soften some of those difficult power struggles that occur. And, you know, it's not just a male-female thing. It can be female-female. It can be male-male. We see it everywhere. I would say it's more of a misunderstanding of perception and knowing where that person is coming at from that perspective and being able to recognize it when it happens and then step back and, you know, heeding Dede's advice of just saying, hey, reaching out to that person separately outside of the meeting saying, look, maybe we didn't get off on the right foot. Can we just talk? What's your perspective? Let's do this without email, without a big room of people. And you might be surprised, you know, people come to work with a lot these days, especially right now with the crisis we're under. So people come at it and we just don't know what they're coming at it from, and seeking to understand that, I think, really helps some of those power struggles.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also add, going back to relationship building, like, especially if it's your manager, usually your manager is not the only one in the room when decisions are getting made about you. So I would again reiterate, like, seeking out other people and building relationship with other people that you know are also in that room is very important, so that they may be able to speak up about you if your manager doesn't, or maybe says something you wouldn't like. They have a different light of you because you've built that relationship with them, and they can speak up for you as well. There's also tools, like Myers-Briggs, for instance, right? That's also maybe a good place to start if you just really cannot connect with anyone, is finding some tools out there to do like a personality assessment to understand what your strengths are and opportunities are compared to the other person you're working with, so you can better understand where they're coming from and maybe use that to change the way you interact with them.
Mm-hmm. Great. So next question is similar, kind of piggybacking off of the last one. How can we exercise influence with or without formal authority? And so in our last conversation, we sort of started to unpack that leadership isn't all about the position you hold, the people you manage. So this takes it kind of a step further and talks about influence with and without formal authority. And Kristin, I don't know if do you want to kick us off here?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, moving from a corporate setting where hierarchy is pretty powerful, and you can learn how to navigate that. Now, moving outside and being being an advisor to organizations that I used to work within, and my team as well, we are all about influence. And so being able to do the work that we do for our clients, which is helping them innovate and grow and creating new experiences, services, and potentially new business models, it is all about influence. And I'd say the two things, if I boil it down, it's around your technical acumen, which Dede, you talked about. And so I think we have to be competent, right, in order to navigate those power structures. Sometimes we've got younger team members, on our team dealing with pretty seasoned individuals inside of corporations. So we have to know our stuff. And then secondly, it's the emotional intelligence. So, we always make sure that we hire people that model our values, that they come to Rêve because they're interested in making an impact in the world, as well as really having each other's back as a community of people who work here. But lastly, really being in it for our clients' success. So not having our own agenda, but really pointed at fulfilling our mission, which is, changing people's lives ultimately. So I'd say it's that kind of age-old, IQ and EQ really at play, and that's how we navigate power structures outside of the corporate, the corporate hierarchy.
Great.
I can go next. My entire career has been in an enablement function. So it literally is influencing without direct authority. And especially in finance and strategy, you're not the salesperson, you're not the engineer, you're not driving the product. So you need to be able to bring value in order to have a seat at the table. And as Kristin said, I think the first thing is really, really, truly understanding your technical competencies and your job, and knowing that you have something to offer. But I would say the most important skill for me that I've learned over my career is truly understanding the business. And so being able to influence, I need to know what is the heart of what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And so I've seen a lot of people who have been part of projects, or they've been on my team, and they really struggled influencing. And it's because whether you're using data or you're using presentation or a project management tool, if you're disconnected from the strategy and the business and really understanding what they're about, you can create the best deck or you can create the best analytics. No one's going to take you seriously. Once you are able to blend it and use that data to tell that story and help them understand how you are on the same page to help propel the business or the goal forward, that's when they start to seek your input. And they start to ask you to sit at the table, and then you've made the difference. Mm-hmm. So I share this advice with a lot of people is don't just create the best analysis and the most, especially folks that there are lots of consultants at Google and lots of people with MBAs, and it's not all of them that thrive. Because it's not about that deck. It's what is in it. What is the so what message that you want to carry? And once you're able to really cross that bridge, it becomes less about what you're producing, but really understanding what they're doing and being able to add value at that table.
Ann or Hardisha, do you want to add anything?
I would say, what I love about what Dede said is making the presentation obvious of how you're helping others, right? Mm-hmm. And so you do need to link it. You do need to understand the business, and that might not sound exciting and it might not be something that you want, but it is something that you need. It is definitely a need. And being able to link your pitch or what you want to do to what will make the company grow, or what the audience needs, or how it will help propel their goals is really, truly important. We all sit through a lot of meetings, and imagine going to a meeting where someone's presenting something and you're going, why am I here? And what is this going to get me? right? And if that's the case with your presentation, they're tuning you out. They're multitasking and they're hearing just wow, 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 wow. So, really take the time to understand what you're pitching and the impact it'll have and how it'll help whoever your audience is do their work better is important.
Just a quick addition to that. So something I've been working on recently myself, because I am in a project role, no direct reports, and have a large project team that I have to influence, is really just appreciating the work that is getting done by individuals. So I make sure to send them a note back to anything they get me back in email. I believe the more you thank someone for the work, they're more willing to help you do more work, because they are being recognized for the work and effort they're putting in, as well as telling them, to Anne's point, why. Why is this important? Why is whatever they're getting me good or great for the project and helps it move along? What impact does it have on me and what it's doing for the project?
It's all really good advice, and Hardisha, to your point, is probably even more relevant in these remote and virtual times that we're in, because we don't have that face-to-face opportunity to just assume the other person recognizes how much we appreciate what they're doing. You have to really take that extra step. So I just have one more question for you all, and then we'll go to the questions from participants. So again, if you have any questions for our panelists, feel free to put those in the Q&A box now, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. But to wrap up my list of questions, I'm wondering what has been a pivotal moment in your career, if you can think back to that moment, and then maybe tied to that, what advice would you give your former self as you're facing that moment? And Hardisha, yes, you smiling.
Yeah.
You have something on your mind.
Yeah. Mine was recent. So it was actually out of college. I went to one of our plant locations, and then transitioned from the plant location up to this role I have now. And that transition from the plant location to the role I have now is just a very big step. The group I joined is just, first, it's all men. They're all old men with kids my age, and they have lots of just technical experience, lots of years of experience, right? So the imposter syndrome is something I dealt with very much so at the beginning. Even having someone help me with my resume, the wording on it is not that you maybe can do it, no, I can do it. I know I can do it. I can do it well, because I, based off of my experiences. And it's still actually something I still struggle with a little bit today now, even though I've been in this role for over 2 years. But I like to take my wins that I get, on a weekly, monthly basis. That's I can do my job. I bring something to the table, or I hear someone tell me oh, that's a good idea. I didn't think of that. And I'm I do have valuable experience. It may not be as many years as these other people in the group, but what I do have is something to offer and to bring. And I'm a unique individual, and how I handle situations and projects and problems is different than someone else would handle it. And so just coming up from the plant to our Minneapolis headquarters location and working on $1 million projects compared to, less than $500,000 projects has just been a very good, unique experience for me, and giving me confidence that I have something to offer to this company.
Great, thank you. Kristin, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I shared one of my biggest ones, which, was the founding of Rêve and why I did that. I think another seminal moment for me was when I was at GE, and I was in charge of a very large process re-engineering that affected quite a bit of the business and its operation. And it was supposed to go live on September 12th, right after 9/11, or September 11th. And I think for me, I was so married to the success of that effort and really making it happen that I should have pulled back on the project and waited until the situation had passed in terms of some of the impact of 9/11 and what it did to that project. But I think for me, the big learning was taking risks is important, but it's also okay to dial it back. And have a reason for that, and be comfortable sharing that with your leadership, even though it may feel like you're failing. So that, I think, was a really pivotal experience for me early in my career, and something I continue to, to balance and lean into.
Anne?
For me, my pivotal moment was roughly 20 years ago, when I had kind of put my head down, and I actually told people I was running underneath the radar. I just wanted to do my job, but yet I had this feeling in my stomach that I could do more. And I sought a mentor, and it was someone outside of Medtronic. It was someone that I was connected with through just my network. And this person spent a year with me, helping me actually write a personal vision for myself, understand who I was. At the time, I would say she was my coach, but we didn't even realize that she was my mentor. She challenged me to go and have lunchtime meetings or coffee meetings with 12 different people over 12 months. Actually put it in my development plan to learn more about what happens at the different functions within Medtronic. And she helped me discern for myself that I wanted to move from being an engineer to a leader. And as someone in my family, the first 4-year degree engineer in my family, my father was very proud. It was very hard for me to tell my parents I'm going to move to be a leader, because they had sent me to school to be an engineer. But they just looked at me and they said, well, of course you're going to be a leader. That's who you are, and that's what you want to do. And they endorsed me. And it's really propelled my career, because I can now, back then I even had positions where people said, well, will you be this independent contributor? And I said, I know I can do that job, but it's not what I want, and it's not in line with where I'm going to go. And I waited, and the right opportunities came along, and it really helped me get to where I wanted to be.
That's great. Thank you. Dede?
Yeah, I think for me, the pivotal time was probably at Target, my first managerial position. So coming out of business school, I joined a leadership rotation program, which they hold 2 spots for U of M, and then everybody else is Ivy League. So you can imagine the intimidation, but the path was really, everybody goes into merchandising and everybody becomes a leader of the stores, and that was a flashy thing to do, and that was the fastest path. So typically 2 to 3 years out of business school, folks are becoming directors, and I got to that 3-year mark in that program, and they asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, I actually want to go and do something in accounts payable. And accounts payable is kind of viewed as the rut of the company. Everybody was like, why would you want to do that? One, it will slow down your trajectory. Nobody sees what you're doing. And I, at that time, said, I actually wanted to do that because I wanted to see a different part of the company, and I wanted to do something no one else in the program had ever done. You guys probably know Michael Fidelki. He is now the CFO of Target, but he was the one I was talking to, and he said, well, you know this, Dede, this is going to slow you down 3 to 5 years. And I said, that's fine. I am so glad I did that, because what that showed was it gave me the ability to lead a multi-layer, exempt, non-exempt employee type, to see operations, to really see the heart of what my team did was just paying invoices, but it meant you touched distribution, you touched negotiations, you touched the stores. I booked accruals. And yes, for the first year, everybody was like scratching their head, career suicide. But that has been so helpful, because as I was looking for roles to move in the company, everybody wanted not just a person who had always done merchandising, but not only did I have merchandising, but I had seen all these parts of the company. And fast forward, 8-9 years later, when I came to Google, my first month, I had the opportunity to work with Ruth Porat, who is the CFO for Google. Because of that, somebody had said, hey, we're looking at Google. They have all this cash. They have no process. They've been growing so fast. And somebody had said, there's a girl that just came from Google. She's very tiny. I mean, if you see me, I'm 5'1", but boy, she has seen all parts of that company. I think if you put her on this project, she could make an impact. And that catapulted my career now at Google, where literally everybody thinks of Ruth and they think of little old Dede, but I can do a lot of projects. So my message to the team is, or to this group is, yes, did it slow down my career at Target? Yeah, it did 2 or 3 years later. but it also paid dividends so much more. And had I not made that decision, and had I listened to everybody and not challenged the status quo, I probably wouldn't have had such an awesome experience and met so many different people in that role. So that was really the big aha for me. And I still remember my now husband, who was my fiance then, was like, "What are you doing, Dede? Like, who does accounts payable?" And now I'm like, well, guess what? I just got a card from Ruth because of that experience. So you never know what you'll get, but don't forget to just challenge yourself and take opportunities that are will put you outside of your box.
That's such great advice, and this has been such a rich conversation, and we're already, coming up at the end of our hour, and we have some really fantastic questions from our participants, or our team, Dede, as you just called them, which I love it. I feel like we're in this together. We're a team now. So I'm going to do my best to try to summarize a few of the themes that I'm seeing in the question, so we can at least get to a couple of them. The first one I'm going to ask, Davey writes, "I'm taking notes at breakneck speed. This information has been incredibly helpful. Can you speak more to coaches and mentors? How have you sought them out, and how have you both brought value and derived value from the relationship?" And there were some other questions, especially earlier on in the conversation when we were talking about coaching. Where do you go about finding those resources? And so, Anne, do you want to speak to this question?
Yeah, there's a place called International Coaching Federation. If you just Google that, there's actually a location where you can go to find a coach. So people have businesses where they do this. And I would recommend starting there. Coactive coaching is the coaching model that Medtronic has invested in, and it's a great activity. We're also really fortunate. We've got a very strong mentoring program within the company, and so we can connect. However, for me personally, it's really been more about identifying what it is I want out of a relationship, being very clear about that, and then going to my network and saying, who can help me get there? And asking if someone can help me find a mentor. So know what you want and know how to, and know to ask your network about it.
Any other advice, maybe from one other panelist, on finding a mentor? How have you found a mentor?
For me, I think it's someone that, really, again, I'll go back to values, but I've been in corporate programs where I was assigned a mentor, and I had one in particular that I just could not work with. We just did not have the same values. I didn't respect that person's advice because of that. And so I could have been a career roadblock for me to do what I did, but I was just really uncomfortable. So I think you do need to find someone you respect, someone that you can, be vulnerable with, and someone who, ultimately when they give you advice, you do believe it.
A next theme of questions is around really balancing both the courage to be direct and have a can-do, take charge, leader-like attitude with being a human being, a relationship builder, and somebody who can show vulnerability without being stereotyped as a woman. So with all of that in mind, and Dede, I see you laughing, so I'll turn it over to you. How do you find that balance?
I'm laughing because that's how people describe me. Everybody talks about, I have the highest expectations of myself and my team, yet my manager feedback upward survey has always been over 98%. And a lot of people ask, how are you even able to do that? I tell my team and the people I work with is we're a family. And at the end of the day, it's just work. And I think that really helps, because sometimes you do need to have difficult conversations, whether it's telling no to a project that you just don't think it makes sense for the company to invest in. It doesn't have the right ROI, which is going to turn everybody awry in that meeting. They're just going to be very, very unhappy. And being able to maintain and progress things without sacrificing that relationship. And then I also always say the baseline is your relationship. If you have a solid relationship with people, you can have the most direct, tumultuous conversation and still be able to go at the end of the day and have a happy hour. And that's what I do. I start with getting to know people, and it takes 3 to 6 months to just build a relationship, so that by the time you get to the point in that relationship where the conversation is harder, or you need to be very direct, whether it's giving tough feedback or being direct to a leader about a project they love, but it just doesn't pencil, you already have that, and they know it's coming from a good place, and it's not going to come off as you being either aggressive or passive. And particularly for me as a Black woman, if you're direct, it's like you're the angry Black woman in the room, or you're very aggressive. And so it's very, very important for me to really think about that relationship as a baseline.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, you can't do it.
It is possible, and I want to just in our last minute or so put a plug out for a couple of follow-up resources that I think connect nicely to the advice that's been shared. We did another webinar last month called Intercultural Communication and Conflict in the Workplace, and it really talked about how you can identify your style and the style of those around you and work to communicate across those. You know, it doesn't assign value in terms of good or bad to any one communication style, but it reminds us that communication is inherently cultural, and how we can understand our own style and the style of others can help us be successful in that. So we'll include a link to that webinar in our follow-up email too. And there are so many other great questions that we're not going to have a chance to get to, but also want to put in a plug for a resource available to all University of Minnesota community members called the Maroon and Gold Network, which is an online platform where you can join and both volunteer as alumni to share advice with current students and fellow alumni, and seek out other alumni to have informational interviews or coffee chats over Zoom right now. But if you asked a question today and we didn't get to it, go to the Maroon and Gold Network and search the network and find someone who shares your background and interests and ask them your question. Everyone on the Maroon and Gold Network has raised their hand and said, yes, I'm willing to help my fellow University of Minnesota community in this way. And I believe some of our panelists might even be on the Maroon and Gold Network. So you could go find them and ask them your follow-up question one-on-one. But with that, we are up at 1 p.m. So want to give our panelists an opportunity to add any final words that they want to share during this webinar. Anybody want to add anything?
It was great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you all
investing
your
in
time. There's
yourself.
a lot of comments coming into the chat saying thank you. This was fantastic. This information was gold. Thank you, panelists. So we will again share the recording with everyone who registered, so you can rewatch or share out with people that are important in your life. And thank you so much to everyone who took the time to be here with us, especially the panelists. And a special shout out to my colleague, Rebecca Lubert, who set up today's conversation. And want to thank her for all her efforts in getting this off the ground. So thank you again for joining us, and have a great and safe and well afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.